Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Brian Thompson, the founder of Brian Thompson Financial, a fee-only advisory firm focused on serving LGBTQ couples, on the show today. Brian spent 10 years as a tax attorney, but always had an interest in personal finance. He watched his mom get sold some inappropriate annuities and saw an opportunity to help more people in this area. He ended up sitting for and passing the CFP exam and then registering his RIA back in February of 2016. He didn't actually launch until August of 2016, about 6 months later, but he has hit the ground running. A year in, he has 13 retainer clients and charges on average of $1,500 up front and around $300 a month. He uses a net worth and income-based calculation, which he said he felt like really puts him on the same side of the table as his clients and reduces some conflicts of interest that come with other fee structures. Brian is an amazing writer and has been producing a lot of content geared towards his target market and is starting to see great results from that. And like many of our recent guests, he was quick to praise his business coach, Elizabeth Jaton, for all the help she's given him in helping move his business forward. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/120. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Brian. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Alan. The podcast has been really valuable to me, so I hope my story can help other people.
Well, I appreciate that. And you know, I don't ever want to take for granted people being willing to come onto the show, not just the time commitment, but also I know I can ask some pretty personal and in-depth questions and people being willing to respond. I don't think I've ever had a situation where someone said, like, I don't want to answer that question. Everyone is just so open and honest and giving. And I think it's very much appreciated, which is why we continue to have people download the episodes and continue to tune in. For
sure. And I think being open and honest is super helpful and super valuable. So I will be as open and honest as I can.
No, I appreciate it. And I think it's, in many ways, it's what sets XY Planning Network and I'll say the old school. And we're not the only ones in this boat, but the old school sort of cutthroat sales mentality. I think it's one of the big things that highlights the difference between sort of what makes our group of advisors different. And I think it's that we have sort of this abundance mentality, this collaborative mindset, the willingness to share your secret sauce. Because you recognize that everyone can have as much of the secret sauce as possible and we're still not competing with each other. Like we're still just like all building a business together, which is really fun, you know, very different, I think.
And I think the other part too is that I've just run into so many people that have been super helpful on my journey in this. And so I feel sort of obligated to do the same for other people that have given their time and given their information freely just to help me out and help me grow. And I feel like I should do that too.
Sort of a pay it forward mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. Listeners may have heard me say this before, but I mean, that's really where XY Planning Network came from, was when I was launching my firm, I called some people that picked up the phone and were very helpful. And I committed that anytime someone called me, I would pick up the phone. And just, you know, that was just a time and place and partnering with Kitsis on some things, like just got a lot of phone calls.
That's really awesome.
It was happy to help, but it's like, you know, at some point you have to focus on the business. And so, yeah, that was sort of in a way the birth of XY Planning Network. But
yeah.
So give me just sort of an overview of your current business, sort of where you're located, how many clients you have, your focus, just sort of the broad brush stroke, I guess. And then we'll dig into the details as we go.
Okay. Well, I'm based in Chicago and I specialize in comprehensive financial plans for LGBTQ couples. So we do a lot of life planning in addition to the technical stuff. And right now I've been at it for a little over a year. I launched in August of 2016, August 1st. And then I guess at my year mark, I had about 13 clients, 13 relationships. 12 of those were retainer. One of them had quit after about 8 months because he had some financial issues. So right now I have 11 retainers, and I think the project clients that I had at the beginning of the year are going to come back at the end of the year.
That's awesome. So even the clients that you have lost, you think will come back?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, we'll just see. I mean, obviously you never really know, but I'm pretty confident that we were doing good work and that it was something that they valued.
Sure. That's awesome. So almost 14 months in,
Yep.
Do you feel like you're sort of able to breathe yet? Or do you feel like you're still in that sort of crunch mode, like got to keep growing and, not quite there yet?
Yeah, I'm not quite where I want to be. And I think a part of that is just the process of time and growing. One of my mentors had reminded me, I'd said like one client a month was where I wanted to be at the beginning of the year. And now that I was here, I was like, oh, it would have been nice to have two. So he reminded me, no, remember you said one was fine. So I feel like having that reminder was helpful, but there's still a lot of things I want to do. I'm a writer, so I like using analogies, and I feel like growing this business is sort of like writing a draft of a piece. So that first draft is that first year of getting everything down, trying to format it, seeing what it's going to feel like, having that subject area. And then my second year, I want to be my editing year. So where I'm actually making things clear and making the path clear of what I want to do, what I want this firm to be, getting some help doing that with a business coach. And then hopefully by my third year, I have this clear and polished draft of what it is that this firm is, and then work on another piece from there.
I love that analogy because it so is what it is, where you're just like putting everything you can think down on paper, knowing you're going to clean it later.
Right.
But if you get obsessed with like editing as you go, you'll never finish the paper.
Right. And so always those first drafts are just seeing what it is, and it's not going to be perfect. You know that, and you just have to come back and edit it later.
Yeah, you've really got to be comfortable with that. I think that's one of the hardest things about starting a business and just sort of entrepreneurship in general is that we can get very focused on wanting to be a perfectionist and wanting everything that we put out to be the exact representation of who we are and the level of quality that we want it to be. And it's impossible to do in your first year. Like it's just, there's too much to do.
Yeah. And that was really hard for me to figure out because I'm super, super left brain to begin with and very risk averse. So I know I need to take calculated risk. And this is one of those risks that are very uncalculated in many ways. So it took me some time to get used to just going and seeing how things were. Like I got approved in February of 2016 and didn't actually leave my job and really launch until August. So it took me some time to just figure out what I wanted to do, make sure I was comfortable, and then go from there.
So tell me about your sort of journey into financial planning. Have you been in financial services your entire career, or is this sort of a career change for you?
It's a bit of a career change. I was actually a tax attorney for the last 10 years.
So still recovering, I assume?
Yep, still recovering. I always tell people I like being a little bit more proactive with people's money rather than reactive, and that's what the law was all about, is reacting to people that were already in trouble. I wanted to do that change, and I mean, I've sort of been always interested in personal finance. I've graduated from law school with $166,000 in student loans, and I was living with my partner at the time and trying to figure out how all of this worked. My dad died when I was in college and left my mom a lot of money that she had no idea how to deal with. So I wanted to help her and try to figure all of that out. She had a financial advisor. I use that with air quotes because he ended up selling her some annuities and locking up her money and taking $50,000, $60,000 in commissions from her. So yeah, it was all a mess. But I feel like all of these experiences and all of these circumstances have led to me doing what I want to do. And I love where I am right now and love the prospect of what I can do for people in the future.
So what made you want to become an attorney and specialize in tax? I guess what was it that you saw about that area and sort of profession that was attractive to you?
Well, I actually didn't know. So when I was a senior in college, I was an English writing and philosophy double major. And so I got to the end of my senior year and was like, oh, well, what am I going to do with these majors? So, and plus at the time, like I said, my dad had died and I was just coming out of the closet and trying to figure out this new relationship. So it was a really confusing and stressful time for me. Sure. So I took a year off after undergrad. Well, not a year off. I worked as the assistant director of the writing center at my college. And that gave me some time to think about what I wanted to do. And I thought, okay, I'm either going to go get my PhD in philosophy or I'm going to go to law school. And one of the philosophy professors was like, go to law school. That's where the money is. So that's what I did. Not really knowing what law school was about or what lawyers did. I just thought that's where the money is. Law school sounds sort of fun. So I'm a huge nerd, so I love to learn. So it seemed exciting to me at the time. But then in my second year of law school, I took a tax class and just fell in love. Like all of the rules and the organization and the exceptions to the exceptions, it all just fascinated me. And so for a minute, I thought I was going to quit law school and become an accountant because I thought those are the people that deal with numbers. So maybe I will do that. But then an advisor said to me, no, you can do numbers and taxes as an attorney. So why don't you pursue that? And that's what I did.
Isn't it funny how, just how we discover the careers that we discover? That's like, oh, you should go to law school. Like, okay, I should go to law school.
Right.
Like, you just sort of do it and see what happens, and it works out. Yeah,
it works out. I always tell people, like, I've advised people who are trying to go to law school to at least know what lawyers do. I think that was sort of a problem for me. It's a really expensive education. So going there and not really knowing what you want to do and knowing what lawyers do in general is probably not the best. At least give yourself some sort of view of what you can learn and what you can do after you graduate.
Yeah, it's always a focus for me when I'm talking to young people, especially high school students. And like when you're thinking about what you want to be when you grow up, like you can be something other than a doctor, lawyer, veterinarian, or a mechanic. Like there's all these nuanced jobs, and like I think about our entire team at XY Planning Network, and like I don't think any of us ever expected to end up where we are. Because we had these like nuancy jobs. Like, you're like, I love to do event planning, but like, I'm going to be the event planner for a, platform that helps advisors start their own company. Like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. Like, you don't think about that. But, when you're taking on $166,000 student loan debt, like it's a major investment to be willing to undertake.
Right.
So, and I want to talk about this a little bit more because of your involvement with the diversity committee at XY Planning Network. But I'm curious if you found the legal world to be as sort of that stale, male, pale mentality that we talk about in financial services. Like, was it pretty, I guess, rare to find a, homosexual black man in legal, or was it more accepted, I guess, to not be just a white guy in that field?
Yeah, I think it's sort of the same experience of there are very few. So I guess that makes it a little bit easier to find because people know who they are, right?
I guess that's true.
Right. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's just in sort of the world that we live in. I feel like you sort of find those people that look like you and that are like you, and you gravitate towards them. So yeah, I did find mentors and people that could help me through the practice and being a gay black lawyer, and other people too. Like even my mentors now, I have two mentors, one who's a gay black financial advisor, and then another who is just straight white woman, who we're just in sync, like our minds are in sync. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to find somebody that is like me, but it's helpful for that person to be out there. Yeah, I think that's part of what I want to do is why I want to be that person. I want to be out there and be that person for people to see so they can find somebody that looks like them and that is like them and can help them through the process.
Which, I mean, I have to admit, as a white male, does not resonate with me one bit.
You don't have any trouble finding white men? That's crazy.
I know, right? I'm trying to think if I've ever been in an instance where I've walked into a room and been like, oh, there are no white men here. I mean, this is a horrible example. The closest thing I can say is we went to IMCA, the investment conference. And I remember there were like 3 of us that were under 40 and just feeling, I mean, you just feel out of place. And again, that is like the tiniest example of that it's just hard to even comprehend what that feels like. I can understand that it happens because I've definitely been at conferences where literally there are no people of color, which is embarrassing. And just to think like what it's like to be the one that comes, and then the second, and then the third. And I recognize it gets easier as that number grows, but to be in that first, I don't know, 30 sucks.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Yeah. I was just at the Quad A conference last week, and LeCount Davis, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's like the first African-American CFP.
Okay.
He's the founder of that organization, helped build it up to where you're finding African-American professionals, CFP professionals. And he said something like, it doesn't count if you're the first one and you don't bring other people along with you. So I've always held on to that. Like, yeah, you may be the first one or you may be number 50, but you still have an obligation, I think, to help others behind you and help the people who are around you get better and help everybody get better. Because it's not a minority thing. We're all affected by the lack of diversity, and we're all missing out by the lack of diversity. And the more that we can actually help build us up and build everybody up, the better we all will be.
So tell listeners real quick about what Quad A is, because they may not have heard of this organization.
It's the Association of African American Advisors. So it's just a group of African American advisors that come together. This is the first time I've actually been to the conference, but they have an annual conference. I think they've been around for like 16 or 17 years, and are focused on building the community of African American advisors. So it's not as hard to come into the industry and stay into the industry. A big point at the conference last week was, a lot of the CFP board and the NAPFA and FPA, they're good at recruiting, but they're not good at keeping people in the industry. So helping these people who are coming in succeed. And that's what you really want. You want people to come in and stay around and flourish and help give the example of what you can do as an African American financial advisor.
So is that a conference you'd recommend advisors attend?
For sure. I had a really great time. And not only for the information, but just connecting with people. I met a lot of people. I met Jeff from NAFO, which I had heard about, but I'd never met him before. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many people that I got to interact with, which is fun.
That's awesome. I have not been able to attend. I actually don't think I even knew about the organization until maybe 2 years ago. And we were a sponsor last year, and then I had a conflict this year as well. And I don't know, are there many white advisors that come, or is it pretty?
There are a few, but I mean, I think it's mostly focused on African Americans, and even like the speakers, most of them were African American. So, yeah, but there were definitely white people there.
Okay,
not very many. Yeah,
probably need more, but you also don't want it to be too tilted either. So always an interesting balance. But okay, so just to go back a little bit, so you had mentioned sort of you were in law, you were wanting to transition into financial planning. How did you make that transition? Like, is this the job you just left last year, was as a lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, so all the time that I was being a lawyer, I'm a big personal finance geek. So that entire time I was reading about personal finance, getting anything, like any books I can get my hands on, listening to podcasts. I started a blog in 2013. In 2011, I took the Boston University Certified Financial Planning course and got my CFP just because I thought it would be fun and it was related to what I was doing already. So I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but I thought the knowledge would be good to have. And then in case I needed to do something with it eventually, I would have it. And lo and behold, 3 years later, the partners of the firm were splitting. And one of the partners said, "Oh, you can come with me, help build up the firm. And then you'd have the possibility of being a partner later down the road." And at this point, I'd been practicing for 10 years, so I didn't really feel like I wanted to spend another 10 years building up somebody else's firm and then with the possibility of actually cashing into my sweat equity.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, and then around that time, actually, this is how I heard about XYPN. I heard Sophia Barra's podcast. Mm-hmm. I'd followed her on Twitter and discovered that this is a thing that you can do. And like a week later, I was joining XYPN and learned how to do it. A couple months later, I was registered and sort of just went along as things were learning about how software works and what software to get and listening to the podcast, taking notes, just trying to figure out how I would actually do this, and then felt comfortable around August to actually launch.
Now you have your CFP. So when did you sit for the CFP exam, and how did your legal, like the tax legal work, qualify for the experience?
It did, yeah. So they pushed back a little bit, saying that it was sort of the practice of law, but the type of law that I did, tax, also CPAs and EAs can actually represent clients. And we're doing financial planning, right? We're assessing these client situations. We just are much more tax focused. And so after I wrote my appeal, they agreed and let me. I should actually answer your question. I took the exam in 2011 and then got whatever the fall exam in 2011 and then was approved in February of 2012.
Very cool. All right. Yeah, I did not realize that some of that legal work could count, because I do think there are quite a few attorneys that, are transitioning over and into financial planning. So that's good to know that if in certain cases that you might be able to get the experience requirement.
Right.
So you really started your firm with the knowledge, right? And having the CFP and going through that education, all that, but really the first time you were actually working with clients as a financial planner was inside of your firm that you owned.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a huge leap. That's awesome. Like I know there are people with 10 and 15 years of experience working with clients that are unwilling or just terrified to make that leap. So it's awesome that you had the courage, I think, to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've done a lot and read a lot about financial planning, and I've gone through a lot in my own life, and obviously helped my mom and helped some people along the way. So I felt confident in my skills and my abilities. I think where I'm sort of learning now, and things that they don't teach you in the CFP, is the emotional aspect of it and dealing with the life planning parts of it, learning how to take into account the interior emotional and the exterior emotional, just having the knowledge base and the soft skills in order to actually help clients in that way. Money is so emotional, and there's so many emotional barriers that sometimes number solutions won't work. And learning how to do that and learning how to articulate that in a way that clients understand has been my learning curve recently.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. It's this whole art and science of planning, right? I mean, we learn the science in CFP school, but they give us these perfect case studies where there's always enough money and no one would ever make a bad decision or do something contrary to what their financial advisor expertly recommends. and then you meet your first client and you're like, yeah, that is not how this works.
Right.
So how was the so you said you spent 6 months essentially from when you got registered to sort of when you made the leap. Was most of that time spent sort of learning the craft and getting the technology built out and that sort of thing? Or were you sort of working with any clients or talking to clients at that time about what you were looking to do?
Well, I had a couple of clients beforehand, a couple of one-off things. And so I sort of knew the concept of financial planning and how it worked. But dealing with financial planning software, I had no idea. Getting a CRM, all the CRMs that I was learning were different from the ones that we used in the legal field. So just trying to get an understanding of what it is that I needed to do, how I needed to market, what my website should look like. And that's why I said at the beginning, like the XYPN radio podcast has been invaluable, because that's where I learned about all these things, and going into the forums and figuring out, oh, this is how you register, and this is how these are the types of things that you need to think about, and this is what a TAMP is, and all of those things. Like I just sort of learned along the way.
It's tough to do it without doing it,
right?
You know, I mean, there's no magic shortcut. And we do our best to, you know, just because there are questions that everyone sort of has the same question, so we can address it. But yeah, there's a lot of things I wish that we could, you know, help people avoid. But ultimately, you know, many times the missteps are just the missteps, and we all learn by doing it.
Sure.
So where have you seen success? You said you have 13, or at the end of your first year, you had about 13 clients. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So where are you seeing success in terms of sort of those clients finding you, or you finding those clients and being able to engage them for services?
A few avenues, mostly through my personal network. I think 6 came from friends or friends of friends. And then also being an LGBTQ specific advisor, people found me just by searching that. I've gotten on things like gayadvisor.com or the Illinois LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. Those sort of aggregate sites allow you to pull up different people and when you're searching. And that's really how I search for things. I spoke at a panel at Betterment in New York. In December, I got a client from there. And then a couple clients found me either through Google search or through an APFA.
So really has been a bit of a shotgun approach in a good way. That, I mean, they're coming from a lot of different places.
Yeah. And I think once, you know, my marketing funnel builds up and I've seen more just LGBTQ specific, because that's what I'm marketing towards. I think that will sort of skew up. I think I'm right now, it's like 46% niche to non-niche. And I assume that will just get a bigger gap as time goes on.
Right. So talk to me about you. So you said you're focused on LGBTQ couples. So obviously you have some experience in this area, so that certainly helps to establish the expertise. But I guess what is unique? I guess the obvious piece is just being able to communicate and understand the life situation and just sort of worldviews and all of that. But I guess in addition to that, what else is sort of specific to that group that allows you to be sort of the expert and allows you to differentiate yourself from other advisors that don't necessarily have that expertise?
Well, I think that's a huge part of it, is just the expertise as far as being familiar with the mindset of LGBTQ couples and how they operate and the circumstances that they're thinking about, how it's different to just now think about getting married or how it's different to create a family and plan for a family. So learning the specifics of in vitro and IVF and adoption and the different costs, things like that, and having to unwind. There's a lot of people who were in domestic partnerships before and are now trying to figure out, do I need to do something different? Do I need to unwind? Do I want to get married? Do I not want to get married? What are the ramifications of getting married? Being able to deal with that mindset and take it. I understand that this is a new thing for you and it's a new scary thing for you, and being able to deal with the emotional side of that as well. And just like,
and there are things like that that I don't even think of. Like, obviously we spent a very long time where those couples couldn't get married. And so they probably made a lot of decisions around the fact that they couldn't get married that now may need to be unwound.
Right.
Because that stuff can get really complex if you were, because there were just so few avenues that to allow for the protections of legal marriage if you couldn't be legally married.
Right. Or feeling like a domestic partnership is the same as marriage in some way. Or, some places have gotten rid of domestic partnership benefits because you can now get married. So there's no sense to disqualify or to separate those out.
Oh, interesting. So if you went through and went through the domestic partnership paperwork, basically, you're now no longer qualified for benefits. So you've got to get married in order to get marriage benefits.
Right. Depending on where you are, of course, the state.
Right.
But yeah, and I guess that's the other thing, like trying to navigate the patchwork of state rules is still complicated because there's still it's still new and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on and what's happening. And there's still issues around your job security and whether you can be fired for being gay, which you can in something like 32 states or 28 states, I think, at this point. Yeah. So, like I said, it's those nuances and being familiar and having your hand on the pulse as far as what's going on with the LGBT community is important and essential to good planning, I think. Yeah,
like I said, that's one of those areas that I remember one of my first clients was out of New York and had a domestic partner and I was only working with one party in the couple. And that was sort of when I learned how much I didn't know. And they ended up working with a different advisor longer term because I was, for lack of a better phrase, like I was over my skis when I got into it and realized like I'm trying to advise on benefits and like I don't understand how they work.
Yeah.
And again, and that was actually before the Supreme Court ruling. This would have been back in 2012. So It was amazing how complex it is. So has it gotten simpler?
I think so.
Okay. So it has gotten simpler. I'm assuming there's still a lot of emotion and stuff tied up in it, but it is at least simplifying.
Right. I mean, everybody is now at least on the same plane. I just consider it like it's just getting familiar with the rules at this point. If you haven't had to think about this for decades, and now I had a prospect say to me last week, like, I never thought I would get married, so I didn't have to think about this stuff. Yeah, that's right. And whereas some straight couples have been thinking about this for a while, and you had your parents talk to you about that, and you had your parents talk to you about money and what it means to be married and what it means to share expenses. We didn't have those conversations.
This is the kind of stuff that just like, it blows my mind because, again, things I don't think about, right? Like you just growing up, with the assumption is you're going to get married and you're going to have more merged finances and that's a conversation. It never occurred to me that there are folks that just assume you can't get married, so why think about it?
Right.
And now that has been upended in a good way, but it's still a difference that has to be addressed.
Right. And that needs to be acknowledged. It's a difference that you can't just gloss over. Everybody's like, oh yeah, all the planning's the same now since you guys got married or since you guys got marriage rights. I'm like, no. We're still different. We're still different. We're still unique. And there's still things that we worry about that you don't.
So talk to me about just sort of your planning process and the way that it's structured. It sounds like you're primarily retainer based, like all of your clients are ongoing.
Yeah. And so I how far do you want to go back? Like the initial call, like I do a 15-minute introduction meeting. And then if it sounds like we're going to be a good fit, I do an hour-long goals and values meeting. This is before they even sign up. I like to dig deep into the nuances and the values and making sure they have a good understanding of who these people are and why they want to plan and the different barriers to their planning, whether it's family history or the relevant social norms of today and they're uncomfortable or discomfort with that. And then spend a lot of time just figuring out, all right, who is this person? What are we going to do for them? Where do they want to go? And how can I help them get there? And then after that meeting, they can decide whether they actually want to move forward with the process. And I do an initial spending plan. So if they do want to move forward, I have a spending review meeting. I go through the last 6 months of their expenses. I use eMoney for my financial software. So all of that is linked up to their bank accounts and I can see the last 6 months of their spending. I go through that, analyze that, create a spending plan for them that is based obviously on where they want to, the goals that they want to accomplish. And then after that, we set up the spending plan and have, I'd like to say quarterly meetings, but sometimes they're monthly, just to implement everything else, like the insurance, the investing, the taxes. I'm still getting a feel of how high touch I want to be with them. And I feel like I really want to be all over this. Like I want to be in their lives a lot and make sure that planning is going on. I understand that you can't scale that very much, but maybe that just means I have to increase my fees.
Right. So what is your current fee structure?
I have an engagement fee of anywhere between $1,500 to $2,500. And then I do an annual fee based on 1% of your AGI and 0.5% of your net worth.
Okay. So sort of that net worth income calculation, which Illinois will allow, which is great. Illinois can be a little picky sometimes.
I've heard a lot of bad things about Illinois lately, so I thought maybe I'd have to change. And I know that they're holding some people up from registering because of this annual fee.
Yeah, so I had the privilege, honestly, it's always fun to actually get to go. And I actually was able to sit down with the Illinois regulators down in Springfield, which is not a very big airport to try to fly into. But yeah, it's interesting. So an article recently went out in Investment News about this and some of the issues we're having because different states are interpreting unethical, the rule prohibiting unethical business practice in exactly the opposite way. So the state of Utah, for instance, has banned income-based or complexity-based retainers, essentially, with the theory being that you cannot charge more for a unit of time for different services.
Interesting.
It's sort of what it goes back to. So you can't charge $150 an hour for estate planning, but $200 an hour for tax planning. Your time must be valued the same, so therefore income isn't a fair gauge because more income equals the same number of hours, but you're charging more. So your fee structure in Utah does not work. But in Utah, this sort of the concept of monthly fee plus AUM, completely fine.
Right.
In the state of Illinois, they have the exact opposit approach. Monthly plus AUM is not permitted, but income and net worth based retainers are totally fine. Yeah. And they both cite the same rule, which is glorious. And I am not an attorney and I do not know how you survive in this world. I'm just like, all right, guys, come on. But anyway, I used your model. So that was sort of the model I ended up under was this 0.5% of net worth, 1% of income. And I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a little more complicated for the client. $200 a month is easier to say. Mm-hmm. But I loved the elimination of some of the conflicts of interest that I had to deal with, like mortgage,
right.
Should I pay it on mortgage or student loan debt versus saving? Like I really liked that it was net worth and it didn't move the needle in my favor or theirs.
Right. And I actually used the flat fee approach in the very beginning, like I think from August through December, I would say it was like a $750 to $1,500 initial engagement fee and then a monthly fee of $150 or $300 a month. And my mentor was like, you need something that's going to be a little bit more scalable than that because you're going to get different. I had a set of doctors that were probably making close to $500 and a set of nurses that were making somewhere around $200 and they're still paying the same fee. Even though I was spending a lot more time trying to figure out what we're going to do with all of this excess money and how we negotiate you having this circumstance where you feel like you have a lot of things, moving parts, and you have a lot to do and you have a lot of resources. So how do we figure all of that out? So that's why I changed.
Okay. So how did that transition go for you? Because changing fee structures, we all do it in our first year and it sucks every time, but sometimes you just don't know until you get into it. So did you change your fees on your existing clients?
I did not. No.
Okay, so they're still under sort of the old fee structure.
Right. And so when we do the annual review, that's when I will probably pitch the new fee. But I didn't do it at the time because they signed up expecting something else and I didn't want to change it mid-stroke.
Do you anticipate moving them over if the fee is less, but like keeping them on the old fee structure if it's more? Or do you want to sort of push people into it? Not so much a money thing, but just a simplification that everyone's on the same fee schedule.
I'm going to try to push everybody on the same fee schedule. So no matter whether the fee goes down or fee goes up, everybody's doing the same thing.
Okay. So how has it been with the new fee structure? Are you liking it better or are you thinking about some additional tweaks or changes that you want to make?
I like it better. I think like you said, it gets rid of some of the conflicts. And I also like that it's sort of transparent depending on how you explain it to the clients. I know it's sometimes hard to understand, but I like it. And I think also the fees have sort of risen with complexity. which we should try to do in the first place.
Yep.
So it's been working so far. I'm trying to, because of the things with Illinois, I thought about maybe moving to quarterly fees rather than monthly. I sort of give the option of monthly now and then say you can do quarterly if you want, but it's maybe sort of pushing the quarterly approach.
Apparently, they don't care about that. I will just say from my conversation with them. However, the regulator I met with a month ago has now left, so there's going to be a new regulator. So we'll find out.
Awesome.
But yeah, it was just their issue, and they're the only state so far that's had an issue with charging a planning fee plus an AUM fee. And it wasn't monthly. It wasn't the fact that it was monthly or subscription or anything else. It was simply the act of charging a financial planning fee and the act of charging an investment management fee at the same time. They wanted an all-in fee structure that encompassed both services, which, and we're like, but we want to give transparency. Like, that's what this is all about, is showing you what you're paying for and letting you take one service or the other. But,
because they're not the same. They're not the same service.
Exactly. But that was not well received. So, and again, like, I don't think they're trying to harm financial advisors. I just don't think regulators still don't understand financial planning. And I will say that is the vast majority of the conversation I have with regulators, is just trying to help them understand how we view the world when it comes to financial planning, and that it is so different than where the world has been when it comes to investment management.
Yeah. Right. And what's included and what's being done. And it's just catching people up.
Yep, exactly. I mean, and I do recognize there's a fear of sort of the gym membership model, right? Like, let's sign everybody up for super cheap and then never let them out, and we'll never call them back and all of this. And so, it just depends on the state and what they're looking for. But eventually, and we've pressed this as hard as we can, but eventually we'd like to see some sort of standard rules that go across state lines to understand. Because, I mean, Illinois was proposing that any advisor that was trying to register in Illinois because they got more than 5 clients, but their home state was a different state, they were proposing 2 separate ADVs and 2 separate fee structures. And I was like, oh, no. That is not what we're going to do.
Right.
Anyway, that aside, I don't want that to scare anybody, because it's an evolving conversation. But yeah, so my recommendation, you don't have to move to quarterly unless you want to. So what is how often are you changing, or do you expect to adjust the fee based on this net worth and income number?
I'll probably do it every year. To me, that seems fair because I think the process itself, like getting through that initial process of going through everything, creating a spending plan, making sure you're implementing the different parts of it, takes about a year. Then you sort of regroup and see where you are and see what you need to do after that. So that's my thought right now. And I'm sort of going through that process. So I'm sure that will probably change as over the next couple of months as I start to do annual reviews. But that's my thought right now.
Yeah, I know we've had a couple of various folks that use the net worth income model. And again, I really like it. I know Jude Boudreau from Upper Line.
That's where I got it from.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. So I know he changes his every 3 years. I did experience this a little bit where, like, if I had a client that was a part of an IPO. And so he had, like $1 million in income one year. So of course, I'm not going to put that on the income line. Like, that's not fair.
Right.
But if he had a year where he went unemployed and had lower income, like, I also, like, I would have lost either way. Let's just say, like, I'm never going to, I'm not going to take the big years and then also the lower years. Like, I always sort of end up on lower end. So I always battle that. And I don't think there's an easy answer, but it's certainly not a perfect fee structure. There will always be issues, but I felt like it eliminated, especially if you're working with doctors and nurses and things like that folks that have student loan debt. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I love it so far. And I feel like it's helped with the fees. My average monthly fee right now is a little bit under $300. And so I think my average engagement fee is like $1,419. So my average first year fee is around $4,200 and makes the average annual fee around $3,600. Just, to me, a decent starting place.
Yeah, that's much higher than we hear. So talk me through that again. So $1,500 up front. So on average, around $1,500 up front, and then $300 a month. So the first year is just higher because of that $1,500 fee.
Right. And then going into that second year, it decreases because obviously they don't have to pay the engagement fee again.
I think that's awesome. We too often, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make, and our benchmarking survey showed some of this data, that basically 100% of advisors raise their fees in the first 3 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that they got significantly more valuable. I think it's that they undercharged in their first year and realized it. I would say you came out with a pretty aggressive fee schedule, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Because if you had 10 client, your 11 retainer clients at $50 a month, that is a much tougher place to be than if they're paying you $300.
Right. And I think a part of what you were saying before, it's like it's a confidence issue. You want to feel like you're bringing value. You don't know that you are, but as soon as you get into this, you realize you're actually changing these people's lives, right? And you're spending a lot of time with them. You're spending a lot of time on their finances. You're spending a lot of time outside of your meetings and things, trying to make sure that you understand what's going on with their lives. And you're doing a lot for them. So I feel like I was convinced of that early on and saying, don't shortchange yourself. You are doing a good thing and doing a good service that is valuable. And I've sort of experienced that myself.
So you came from a world of real retainers, we'll just say, as an attorney, where you actually charge per hour and you bill against a retainer. Did you ever consider running your business under that model?
I didn't. And because I'd come from the industry, but my firm was actually flat fees. So we were an anomaly in the legal industry that we just did flat fees because it was felt like representation was better that way. It gets the worrying about punching a clock every 15 minutes or calculating something and just focused on the client, which I thought was really important. So I didn't think about doing that type of process for my current clients because I knew the value of a flat fee or flat fee arrangement and that it was better for most people involved.
That is awesome. I love that. I wish I had an attorney here in Bozeman that would charge me flat fees. Because it is frustrating. We're like, oh, did it really take you 14 minutes and 12 seconds to send that email?
Right.
How long did it take you to record that it took you 14 minutes and 12 seconds to send that email? Right.
And that's the thing. Like you're working whatever it is, 2,800 hours to bill 2,100 hours. And so it just didn't make much sense to me. And I'm glad I didn't have to fall into that circumstance in the legal world or in this one.
So you just live on the cutting edge of industry is what you're telling me. Again, that's very rare in legal, much less 10 years ago when you were starting at that firm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're doing a lot of content marketing. You said you enjoy writing. You were the winner of the Best Blog Award for the year at XYPN 17, which was awesome.
Yeah, super exciting. I didn't realize I wasn't even up for it. And I heard my name. I was like, oh, I guess I need to get up and get something.
Go up and say hi. Right. Yeah, that was a member nominated with staff input, I guess. XYPN team input. But yeah, that was a member nominated award. So Tell me a little bit about how you're leveraging content just in general and I guess what types of content you're using in order to establish your niche market and expertise to be able to bring in clients.
Well, that's how I sort of started. Right in 2013, when the Windsor case was decided, I thought, oh, this could be a good avenue for me to provide some expertise and some benefit to the people that are now trying to figure out how marriage works. So I started blogging in 2013 just to give people advice and talk about the things that you need to think about and the different things that are happening as state after state after state began to legalize same-sex marriage. So I just sort of have stuck with that. And I blog every week. It takes me a little bit between 2 and 4 hours a post. And I just put things out there. And I love putting my thoughts down on paper and then getting to edit them. And that entire process, I just really, really enjoy. And that has led to things like I'm now the efficient planner columnist for NAPFA. I'm a contributor to Forbes, just from people seeing my stuff out there and saying, oh, this guy can write well and knows how to express himself. So maybe we should bring him on and just use that to build up my brand and build up the things that I focus on.
Yeah. All right. And so you're choosing to spend time. The NAPFA Advisor is a monthly magazine that NAPFA sends out to its members. So do you see benefit there from a business perspective, or is that more of a giving back to the profession sort of time commitment for you?
More of giving back to the profession, doing what I can to help other people along, because I feel like that's an important part of the legacy that I want to leave. I want to make sure that I'm making the world better for people who are coming behind me and the people that are in the world currently with me. So making sure I can give back and do what I can and use my expertise in a way that helps other people is really important to me.
And I suspect even not being the core purpose probably actually benefits you or makes this even more powerful. But I do suspect that getting to know other advisors will lead to referrals.
Yeah, sure.
We sort of see this world of everyone has a niche and the number one source of clients is other advisors cross-referring, right? Because they're going to run into situations and they just... I don't know, I'm a straight white male. I can't speak. I just don't understand. I can't communicate in the same way. And and with a client couple that you're going to just be absolutely amazing with.
Right.
And so being able to just admit that, like, as a fiduciary, I need to be the best advisor for my client. And it doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect, but like, if there's someone else out there that can do a better job for that client, then you should make that referral.
Or even if there's somebody out there that you feel like has more expertise for you that can help you with a specific issue. Like, I've had people reach out to me that say, okay, I have these clients that I feel like I can handle them. I just need some help figuring out this adoption or IVF issue. So I'm more than happy to help out. Like, I don't feel like just because you're a white male, you can't serve an LGBT person, because there may be some other crossover there. But it's important to have a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, because it's a fair point that, like, in today's environment, LGBTQ, like, that is a niche market. There could come a time where there are 1,000 advisors focusing on that marketplace, and it can get probably even more.
Sure.
Marketplace. That just sounds wrong. I don't know why. Like, I just caught myself saying that. It's a client base that has specific needs, and advisors that could serve those clients better by focusing on that population, I guess is a better phrasing. But I could see it even getting more nuanced and niche, because I loved working with clients that were starting their own business and helping them sort of start that service-based business.
Right.
And definitely we get clients from a lot of different backgrounds and personalities and all of that will play into that. So.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of what my business coach is trying to gear me towards now, saying that LGBTQ couples is actually too big.
Yeah.
You're going to have to start streaming that down to the types of people, the age, the types of circumstances that you're dealing with, and trying to really narrow it down to make sure that because you only have room for 50 or 60 clients, whatever it's going to be. So you want it to be as perfect as you can.
Are you sort of leaning a certain direction when it comes to sort of what the next layer of focus will be for you?
Well, right now I'm sort of figuring out how life planning works and the different nuances of life planning. That's why I love that you had Mitch Anthony at the conference.
Yeah.
And learning about that and the process behind that, because that's not for everybody either, right? Focusing on emotions and dealing with emotions. A lot of people may want to avoid that, for better or for worse. So trying to figure out for myself how I want to implement that type of process into my business has been the focus so far. And I learned so much already in these past couple of months with the business coach, and I'm taking a class and obviously listening to things like Mitch Anthony and his podcast and all that stuff. So,
who is your business coach?
Elizabeth Jatan.
Awesome. So if Elizabeth is listening to this, I actually emailed her today.
Oh, yeah?
And she will be a guest on the show here at some point, because you and I believe Meg Bartelt is working with Elizabeth as well. And Elizabeth is very well known for her, the strides that she has pushed the profession forward when it comes to, we'll just say, real financial planning. She's one of the masters of the art of planning, which is awesome. So I'd love to have her on the show.
I'm sort of hesitant to say this because I don't want her to be overfilled with people that she doesn't have room for me, but she is awesome. Like, she is so knowledgeable, so good at what she does, helping you focus, helping you find the right words, helping you find the right circumstances, and just phoning in on what you and your business can do. I couldn't recommend her more highly.
So you mentioned that you're getting some questions from advisors. Do you see that as a potential business line that you want to pursue? Or is it more, helping advisors in specific situations, like I said, like managing adoption for a client that they have the relationship with, but you can sort of come in on one-off cases? Do you see that as something that you would like to pursue and build out as a business line? Or are you thinking that'll sort of be your, again, giving back and help out where you can?
I've never actually thought about that as a business opportunity. It's always been just helping out where I can and helping, because me helping them helps the clients. And either way, like, I'm not going to be able to serve the entire LGBTQ community. So there needs to be other people out there. And I'm doing my part to not only help those existing advisors, but bring other advisors into the fold and say, this is a group of people that need to be focused on and that need help, and should no longer be the token couple in a financial planning relationship. Be able to go to a website and see many couples like them and many diverse couples like them. And I feel like that's a part of my role, is to make sure that those people can be served in a way that is best for them. And I can't do it myself, so I need to help other people learn how to do that.
Absolutely. Do you think clients know they're the token couple at the firm? Like, do you think they know that they're sort of the only one that the advisor is helping? Because I don't know. Because if so, like, I feel like that's got to be a really difficult position to be in and can't be a comfortable relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they know for a fact, but I know that the process of having to come out to somebody is really hard and strenuous. And if you aren't sure if your advisor is familiar with gay couples or works with gay couples or is okay with gay couples, that's a hard thing. And it's not just in the financial advising industry, right? You experience that in any sort of thing that you're doing. If you're going to get your hair cut, you have to talk, what happens if you start talking about your husband or your wife? I think that also plays into the dynamic that I want to change. I don't want people to be afraid to be having to think about that. Do I have to come out to this guy or this woman? And what's going to happen if I do? The thing that and you at least when you're coming to me, that you don't have to worry about that. You say your husband and I don't blink because that's not a thing for me.
Yeah, and obviously we've come a long way, but we're nowhere close. If someone has to feel like they can't talk about their relationship with somebody that's cutting their hair because it may make them uncomfortable, or they may get like super negative feedback from someone because they don't agree with their relationship status, it's sad, honestly, that we're still not there yet.
Oh yeah, I mean we're definitely not there yet, and it happens, and it's uncomfortable, and it sucks.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean it's partly just the Supreme Court rulings and all that have certainly helped, like you said, streamline just the overall expertise. Because again, before then, like, oh my gosh, how complex in terms of how to navigate on that, but still huge needs. And, financial planning, we know statistically it's where the old white dudes hang out,
right.
And there's so many groups like Quad A, and pretty much every organization has a women's initiative and everyone has a diversity initiative, us included, to try to solve this problem of like, why isn't financial planning representative of the overall American population?
Right. Because
we do know that people of color prefer to work with an advisor that understands their situation and is possibly a person of color.
Right.
And, and again, partially just overall just comfort level, and two, just knowledge base and understanding the life situation. So
right.
I guess, do you, and there's no crystal ball here, easy answer. Obviously, if there was, we would have solved it by now, but like, any thoughts on like why we've gotten to this place of, you can go to a conference and literally only see white people?
Oh, geez, that's a hard one. I mean, this would go back hundreds and hundreds of years, right? As far as, as far as how we got to where we are. And I think change is slow. I heard them talking at the conference last week that, they've been talking about this issue for 3 decades and it doesn't seem to have changed very much. And I reminded somebody that, the Civil Rights Act was in 1965 and we are still dealing with civil rights issues today. Like, this is not going to be an easy progress. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment and things that go along that prevent people from discussing issues like this. And it doesn't mean that we can't have these conversations, but they're very, very hard. And you have to be in a space where you can hold space for somebody else's views, even if it's not something that you agree with, and be able to try to take their perspective. And that's also really hard.
That's a good point. I think that's something sometimes it gets lost in communication, is that it's okay to disagree with someone and not hate them.
Right.
Like, it's okay if we're on separate sides of how you view things. I don't know. And I think that's tough I think it's difficult to express that you disagree with someone without it coming across that you hate them or dislike them for their views. But it's just it is a tough conversation to have. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I know during the diversity initiatives panel at our conference, we were talking about, how do we go out and sort of bring in more advisors that are in minority populations and bring them into XY Planning Network, because we truly want to be a home of advisors that are representative of the population of America.
Right.
And is not, 98% white, because the population of America is not 98% white. But it's a little tough because I don't feel like there are enough advisors. Even if you go out and you find all advisors in minority populations, you're still not going to be a very diverse group. And it's really going to be about bringing more people into financial planning, just because, there's just not enough, so like, how do we bring more people into financial planning and show them what an amazing career it is, But on the flip side, have someone come to a conference where it's not all just white dudes, because that's an uncomfortable place to be. And why would you stick around if that's what you saw?
So you're saying that there's like a dearth of talent as far as in the advisor industry? Because I'm not familiar with as far as how many people are in this talent pool that we can actually bring in.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think we have very good data on it, because I know the CFP board tries to gather some of those data, some of that data, but it's very underreported in terms of diversity statistics.
That was actually the exciting thing about the conference last week, is that they had a bunch of statistics. Like the year before, both NAPFA, CFP, and then also the FPA were at a panel there talking about diversity in the industry. And the year before, they were there and people were asking them about statistics and they didn't have any. So this year they came with statistics on the population and how many people were in the industry. And I think it actually starts there. You have to start with what you're dealing with, know how bad the problem is, how many people are out there, and what you can do as a starting point from there. I mean, it's like we do with our clients, right? You figure out the why, you figure out what's going on in the industry, what you want to change, why you want to change it, and then figure out where you are. And if you don't have any statistics, you can't skip that step, and because then you can't track if you're actually improving or not.
Like you said, because Quad A feels like they haven't made any progress in 30 years, and I'm certain they have.
Oh, for sure.
But if you don't have the data to support it, it is tough to be able to show that. And like I said, even with clients, it's great to be able to see sort of that progressing net worth statement. Mm-hmm. It's never as much as you want, but as long as you can see the momentum and sort of moving in the right direction, that's a huge piece.
Right.
So flipping back just a little bit, I do want to talk a little bit more about your business and sort of what you're working on. So going forward, you're a year in, again, you've got a client base, you've made some changes to the fee structure. What's next for you? Like, what do you think the next big focus over the next 12 to 18 months is going to be inside of your firm?
To me, it's getting the piece about, like I said, the life planning and making sure that I have the right structure around my firm, and I'm marketing in a way that actually attracts the types of clients that I want. I'm very clear on the client base that I want. I want to be sure and streamline my process of who I serve, why I serve them, and what I'm going to do to serve them. And that's been my big push working with Elizabeth, is just trying to clarify that even for myself. And then once that's clarified, I feel like the growth from there will happen, because I will start attracting more people that I really want to work with. Not that I'm not attracting them already. I feel like I have a pretty good client base at this point, but just making sure that I'm clear in what I want to do, where I want to go, and how I'm going to serve them is my big push.
Are there many other advisors in your niche that you have found that you can sort of collaborate with, or are you sort of breaking ground here in terms of establishing this population as your focus for your firm?
No, I found a couple other through both XYPN and NAPFA. I mean, it's very rare to find an advisor that specifically targets LGBTQ people. Like, you'll find people that say that they serve them, but then you look at their website and you don't see any gay couples on there. You see the straight white couple.
Point.
So I feel like there are very few that actually target them as specifically that I do, but I found a couple through XYPN, which has been great, and doing my best to collaborate with them and share ideas and share experiences. And I feel like as we keep growing, I will do like I said, I will do what I can to help others come into the fold and serve this population that I love so much.
Yeah, and I remember, and Timothy LePayne out of Minneapolis,
right.
He and I were talking at the conference because he was making fun of the hotel's registration process, and it was hilarious, but with a good point that it was not very inclusive whenever you went through the process. But even what to me would be a little thing or something I would not notice, and most advisors aren't going to notice, or data gathering forms tend to say Mr. and Mrs.
Right.
husband and wife,
right?
And because they don't think about it, I guess, and we don't have a lot of advisors that care. But I would assume as an advisor working with a population that is not applicable, that's got to be very frustrating. But the flip side being, you can design a process that shows your focus and the difference between you and another advisor that has, husband and wife on all their forms, and is either, maybe they're scratching it out, to say husband, or they just have to go with it.
Right. And that's a part of the process, trying to figure out how we can best make sure that everybody's included. I said this in the panel, like, you go to places and you hear presentations about the husband and the wife, or the parents are always a man and a woman. And that's not my clients. Yeah. And feeling left out, and those people call them little things, but they make a big difference, especially if you're piling one on top of the other day by day by day.
That's a good point. Are you finding, are software vendors, are you talking to like Precise FP with data gathering and e-money or whatnot? Like, are you talking to those vendors to say, hey, this isn't working, or are they sort of coming along? Are you noticing any differences?
So e-money has actually been pretty good with being able to, the forms were not gender specific. I do have a couple of clients that go by they rather than he or she. So that has not been included, and I brought that up with them, but haven't really seen any progress on that yet. But otherwise, like, I feel like both, I use eMoney for my planning software and then Wealthbox for my CRM. And I've been able to navigate both my same-sex couples and my heterosexual couples pretty equally.
Okay. That's good to hear. I bet 5 years ago that was not the case.
Right.
Or even just a couple of years ago. So it is nice to see just, I don't know, and I get it. Like, we simplify language down, right? And we just want to say he, she, or husband, wife, or whatnot, because it's simple, but it's not inclusive.
Right.
And you don't have to have 84 options either. Like, there's a line in there where you can be inclusive without being obnoxious. And I think that's what Timothy was making fun of the hotel for, was they had something like 84 surname options.
Wow.
So, I think he listed Queen Le Pen. Queen was an option. But I don't believe, I'm trying to remember, there was one specific one that he was looking for that was not available, but Queen was, and like Sultan was.
And they took that. Nice.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. So looking back at sort of your first 13 months in business, what would you say have been sort of your biggest successes and failures? Like and obviously we learned from our failures, but I guess what's been the best decision you've made, and maybe your biggest misstep that listeners could learn from?
My biggest success is actually developing confidence in myself and my abilities. Like I said, I feel like I had the technical abilities, but the ability to either run the business and serve clients in a way that they are getting value, that was a hard thing for me to realize. And as soon as I developed that confidence, I became a lot more powerful in the things that I was doing, because I believed in myself and the type of work that I was doing, that it made it a lot more beneficial. And it just took me a while to get there, but I eventually got there. So I will say to others what my mentor said to me: you're doing a good thing. You're providing a good service. You're providing a valuable service. And so don't undersell yourself. Let's see, the hardest thing, this biggest misstep. I'm really cautious. So I tend not to be the type of person to just go out and do stuff. So maybe I would have started sooner had I had not been as cautious. I don't necessarily think that's a misstep, because that's just my personality, and that's, sure. I feel like I should probably at some point accept who I am and know that that's me, and that it may just take a little bit longer for me to do things. But I know a part of what we were talking about at the beginning is being able to get out and just start doing. Nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to be the way that you want, but just if you start doing, you start learning, and then you start developing your different processes and how you want to serve your clients in a way that works best for you. I was very cautious to do that. And so I go back and forth of whether I would change that or not, but.
Right. Maybe, and like I said, that sometimes you just have to have those things to either learn from, or that it's just the way it was going to be. But sometimes you wish it wasn't, but it is what it is. Yeah. So as we're sort of wrapping up, I'll ask you the final question. I'm sure you're very well prepared for this one.
I'm very aware of it.
But, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, that one thing you wish you had known then that you've learned and that you know now, what do you think that piece of advice would be? Mainly that it's just going to be a wild ride. And so to embrace it and not try to fight against the current, like celebrate the highs, feel and learn from the lows, and make sure that you're just aware of what's going on, because time has gone so fast. And, if you blink, you're going to miss it. And so I feel like being a part of this journey and actually embracing it and feeling like you're participating in this in your life, and making sure that you're experiencing what it is to build a business and to experience this crazy, crazy ride is something that I wish I would have known before, that I sort of learned midway, and really appreciate that I have things to reflect back on. I journal a lot. So being able to reflect on where I was at a certain point and what I was thinking and how the emotions that I was going through at the time is sort of fun to reflect on. And I can see how far I've come and see where I still want to go. That's a piece of advice I don't think I've ever heard anyone give in the way that you did. And it reminds me of parenting advice, right? When they say like, don't just always wish your kid was older and stop screaming, because you will miss this stage. And like eventually they grow up and you can't make them go back into being small babies anymore. And the business is kind of the same way where, the only way to make it where it was in its first year is to have another one. Just like, and it's the only way you get to experience it again, because it is fleeting, but it is fun.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's fun. And it's such a great point to embrace that you can embrace the challenge without just constantly wishing it away and wishing it would be grown up.
Wishing you were somewhere else or further along it's good to just be where you are and then deal with that.
That's such a great point. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your career story and wisdom. I'm so excited to continue to see the success of your firm and see where you go from here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.